Hey everybody, this is herculespetix, founder, curator, docent, and gift shop employee of the herculespetix Academy of Comic Book Studies. Today we're going to be looking at Fright #1, featuring Son of Dracula. This is a 1975 comic published by Atlas Seaboard, the short-lived comic book company that tried to take on Marvel and DC and failed miserably. This is a pretty, lackluster or not that great Bronze Age comic. In the mid-70s, there was lots of horror comics from Marvel and DC. And so Atlas, who is very imitative of Marvel in particular, they had a bunch of horror titles. And, it's nothing to write home about. But the art in this is really nice. It's Frank Thorne. I think we've looked at Frank Thorne before. He started drawing in the 50s, maybe even late 40s. Very Joe Kubert inspired his art. Over the decades, he definitely got his own style, but it still kind of looks like Kubert. He always reminds me of Joe Kubert, his art. He is probably most famous for doing Red Sonja in the mid-70s at Marvel. He also went on to do lots of kind of softcore, kind of sexy comics like Moonshine McJugs and Gita of Alazar. He kind of became known for that. But this is, I gotta say, I like Frank Thorne's art, but this is, I think, one of his nicest looking jobs he's done. This is some really nice stuff, and it really stands out. He's got such a good style, or maybe not the word I'm looking for is just, interesting style. So many Marvel DC type artists, they're cookie cutter, you could interchange them, but Frank Thorne, you can't deny. Just like Joe Kubert, he's got his style. And start off with this nice Frank Thorne cover. And as you can see, the Kubert influence, but it's also something else is going on. He's not as loose as Kubert, first of all. So he pencils, inks, and letters this comic. And I gotta say, I really like the lettering. It's very lively. And his logos are great. The sound effects, I like this funky logo. And unto Dracula was born a son. That's the title of this issue. So, also I love this. Lots of little panels. Very, always interesting, panelology going on. So we start off in olden times in Transylvania. These villagers are about to burn this witch at the stake. And Dracula flies down and he basically says, hand her over to me. She's way too beautiful to be, wasted, just burnt. I want her blood. The fangs of Dracula want to taste her. And so the villagers run off, and he rescues her. Speaking of Kubert, look at that. And then in this half-bat form, he flies off to his castle with this woman. Really like this panelology here. Nice stuff. So basically, he tells her as she's passed out, but he says, how I thirsted for the precious fluids of one as lovely as you. At long last, my thirst will be quenched. And when he goes down to bite her neck, he notices she has this birthmark. And I guess it's the mark of his family, his bloodline. And he recognizes that she's a cousin of his. So he's basically like, I can't do it. So the following morning, they're having breakfast. And she basically figures out that he's Dracula. The Count Dracula. In his thoughts, he's thinking, he's just making small talk with her, talking about how he recognized her as his cousin because of her birthmark. But he's thinking, I want her so desperately. Can I control myself? My thirst is so great. And you know how there's that thing in vampire mythology, like they're kind of sexy, there's this eroticism to vampirism. I've never seen it so lustfully portrayed. Like, it almost seems like his bloodlust for her is really tied up with erotic lust for her. It's all like kind of entwined It's kind of interesting. And so he's menacing her. And he says, basically, it's like, you know, I've waited for one such as beautiful as you. I need you to, you know, give me an heir. I want a son. And she says, okay, I'll make a deal with you. I will give you a son, but you cannot turn me into the undead. So he agrees, and they have sex, and he takes off because he has to quench his thirst, since he's not allowed to bite her. 9 months later, she bears him a son. Look at this out here. It's way more illustrative than Frank Thorne usually is. He's a little more looser. But some of this stuff, I could almost be mistaken in believing it's like a Filipino artist. Like, look at this panel. I love just the composition of that. Sorry to get ahead of myself, but, and that face even doesn't look like Frank Thorne. It looks like a Filipino artist. But just lots of just nice illustration. Not too tight, but definitely more tighter than Frank Thorne usually draws. So as she shows him his son for the first time, she says, you'll never see him again. He must never become one of your kind. And Dracula's not having it. He's like, bullshit. You can't deny me my son. She says she'll smother him before she lets him, you know, turn him into a vampire. So Dracula's just like, you've served your purpose. It's time for you to truly join me. And that's when he bites her neck. He reneges on his promise. That's Dracula for you. He's a ne'er-do-well. So the next morning, Dracula's, you know, resting in his coffin. And I guess his bride, she hasn't lost her will yet. She feels weak, but she still has her will. So with her, you know, last bit of will, because probably in a day she's going to be a full-on vampire, she takes the son away, takes him to a dock, and gives the son, whose name's Adam, by the way, she gives Adam to this woman who's heading to America. She also gives him a charm, a necklace that he has to wear around his neck. He can never take it off or he might die, she tells this woman. So as she's waving goodbye to the ship on the dock, Dracula shows up. And he informs her that, where's our son? Because by tomorrow night, you'll gladly tell me you'll be a full-on vampire. So the bride of Dracula, I guess they're building the ship. There's a sharpened wooden thing. It seems kind of dangerous to leave lying around. And she dives on it and stakes herself. And of course, Dracula's furious. He's like, cheated. I've been cheated of the one thing in life which gives it meaning. And he vows to seek out the blood of his blood and find the Son of Dracula. I like just how crazy he looks there with the yellow coloring of his skin. So now he's 7 years later, he's in Appalachia. That woman is raising him. Every night he has to sleep with a cross on his chest. And, you know, he's a kid, he's getting curious. He's like, Mother, why do I always have to wear this cross on my neck? And why do I always have to wear this necklace? And then right then, Dracula shows up. He's tracked him down. And she pulls a cross on him. And she says, get out of this house. Look at this crazy panel stuff going on here. Like this crazy, organic, weird line. I've never seen anything like that in a comic. Also like this panel. I would never guess that's Frank Thorne. So basically Dracula leaves. He's like, I'll be back to reclaim my son, and I'll also drain the very life's blood from your wretched body and make you one of my followers. So after Dracula leaves, Adam's mother, you know, adoptive mother, takes him to this little, it's kind of like a cave, cavern, cellar. Almost looks like a hobbit hole. And she puts him inside. She gives him, his cross that he has to wear every night. And she also gives him this book. And she says, if I don't return, read this book and you'll understand everything. You'll know your origins. So she kisses him goodbye. And when she gets outside, she's got this casket of gunpowder. And she ignites it. And this serves a dual purpose. She knows that Dracula's going to come back and get her. And she doesn't want to be turned into an undead vampire. But also she wants to seal in this little, this hidey hole. Frank does a pretty good, I like his sound effects, Very classic style. I also like this crazy panel. It's almost like cool abstract art with the crazy coloring and everything. The explosion. And here's another weird gutter. It's like the mists of time, because now we're in 1975 and we see a young professor named Adam Lucard, and he teaches at Columbia University, teaching occult studies. So you probably get Adam Lucard. If it's an initial A Lucard, it's Dracula backwards. So dumb. It's like an Ed Wood. I don't know if you guys remember when he has that movie called Dr. Acula. It's just as dumb. So there's this kind of like teacher's pet in class. I think her name is Debbie. And she obviously has a crush on Mr. Lucard. And after class, she's chatting him up and she's kind of flirting with him. And she tells him that she's actually a witch. She's really into the occult. And he says, well, we can discuss this tomorrow. I really got to get back to my apartment. So I guess this is the way Adam Lucard lives. He's got to be home by nightfall so he doesn't turn into a vampire. And when he's home, he has to lay down in bed with the cross on his chest. And I guess all these centuries, he's been keeping his evil side at bay by doing this. Man, that is so Frank Thorne right there. So once again, he lays himself down to sleep with the cross on him. He has a flashback to his adoptive parents, his adoptive mother. So after that woman blew herself up with gunpowder, luckily some couple found that little cave, rescued him from it, and they raised him as their own. So when she dies on her deathbed, his, I guess, third mother, she gave him that book, or told him to read the book. She's like, you're a man now, you've got to know the truth. So that's how he knows about all this stuff, all the precautions he has to take. So as Adam falls asleep, Debbie breaks into his apartment. We hear from her, or see from her thought balloons, that I guess this is how she supports herself to pay tuition. She's a house robber. But she thinks to herself, she says, this will be extra sweet. Not only am I going to steal some good shit, but I'll get to be next to that hunky professor, because she really has a crush on him. So she's looking around his place, sees all this crazy occult stuff, and then she sees him in bed. And she says, I'll wake him with a kiss. And she lifts the cross up. And instantly, Adam turns into just a bloodthirsty vampire. And he attacks Debbie. And he just totally drains her. So basically, without the cross, he's not even himself. It's almost like he's forgotten he's Adam Lucard. He's just a full-on bloodthirsty vampire who, with no morality. And as soon as he's done draining Debbie, he basically says, oh, that's not enough. I gotta have more. So he turns into a bat and he flies across the city to find another victim. This is very coincidental, but the first victim he finds happens to be Debbie's friend, who's a partner with her. I guess they both rip off houses together. So she's waiting on Debbie, and he lands behind her, And it's weird, instead of just like attacking her, he kind of like gives her a pickup line. And she's all like, hey, get out of my face, or I'll put some mace in your face. And he turns all bestial on her, and he attacks her and drains her too. The cops show up and interrupt him, so he flies off. They find the body and are like, holy shit, she's got 2 puncture wounds and she's got no blood. I know it sounds crazy, but I think we got a vampire on our hands. So the next morning, back at Adam's apartment, he wakes up, his head's throbbing. He doesn't really remember what happened. And as he gets up, he notices that his cross is gone, and he freaks out. And when he looks down on the floor, his worst fears are validated. He sees Debbie with the 2 puncture marks, and she's dead. And of course, Adam is distraught. So he sharpens some dowel or whatever, some piece of wood he has lying around, and he stakes her. He stakes Debbie in the heart. He says that he's basically sparing her the horror of being, the living dead. And then the last panel is him basically imploring God. He says, hear my prayer. Help me make the right decision. Shall I destroy myself? Or shall I continue to live and work and teach? And it says the end or the beginning. Well, this is the end. I know this because there's no second issue. And Son of Dracula never appeared again. I want to point out, though, another nice panel. This art is just so much funner than your average, mid-70s comic at the time. Like I was saying, he's got a style, And it's not, he's not the best artist, cartoonist in the world, but it's just nice seeing someone, do something different. We have a little editorial from David Anthony Kraft. At the time, he was an editor at Atlas Seaboard, and he's just talking about the origins of this comic. Not many Atlas Seaboard comics had pages like this, so it's kind of interesting. And that's it for Fright #1, featuring Son of Dracula. I hope you enjoyed looking at it. If you're a fan of Frank Thorne, I'm curious if you agree with me. This is like one of his best comic jobs ever. And if you disagree with me or agree with me, I'd love to see your comments about what you think of the art in this issue from what you could see on your screens. But just a interesting little comic from the Bronze Age. Nothing too special, but eventually I'm going to look at all the Atlas Seaboard comics that I own, which is like 98% of them. So, some of them aren't that great, but they usually have something interesting about them. Atlas Seaboard put out some odd little titles, and I don't know, I still love them. I still love that company. I'm fascinated by it. So that's it, guys. Once again, I hope to see you next time here at the herculespetix Academy of Comic Book Studies.